so for excerpt / etude number 1, first I want to talk about the recording. So you can go onto YouTube. Now all these recordings that I'm going to talk about will be on YouTube, so that should be like pretty easily accessible. You know, if not, you can always go to the library and get on the computer there. So this one, I would recommend looking up the Vienna Philharmonic, so Vienna Philharmonic, and then with Daniel Barenboim conducting, and his last name is spelled Barenboim, and the timestamp for that is 4:05, 4 minutes and 5 seconds to 4 minutes and 28 seconds. So it's only like 20 seconds, which is great. So go and check that out. And then a good goal tempo for this one is quarter note equals 84. So you would just put that on your metronome when you're working on it. So that's the first two things. Now the third thing, coming up with bowings and fingerings that work. So for this one, there's a lot of string crossings, as you can see, you know, between the E and the A string, A and the D string, and the G string. And so that can be kind of difficult because the strings are far apart on the bass. And so something that might help, and then also make the sound quality of the excerpt more stable overall, is closing some of those open strings. So when you have the D, so in the first measure, I would recommend closing that with your fourth finger. And then again, and then the third measure, close that again, and then close the G. And so then you're not going all the way from the G to the E, you're going from the D to the E. So that's a smaller string crossing. So I would recommend that. And then of course, again, I was saying the measures in terms of what they come after each other. So before I said measure 1, measure 3, but I'll go to measure 129. It says 129 in the part. Here, I would also close that D because it's kind of awkward. So I would do that. So that's the basics, you know, closing those open strings. Then I would just do the bowings that are in the part, actually. You don't have to change anything. So that's pretty straightforward. So now again, like I talked about, the skill that this excerpt is definitely showcasing is your string crossings. So a good way to practice that is actually isolating the right hand. So just forget your left hand exists, and we're going to look at this, and you're going to think about, okay, what fingering am I doing? So the first measure 122, we're closing the D. So we're actually only staying on the A string. So it's, and then go to the E string, and then the A string, and then we're staying on the A string, and then we're closing that G. So we're going to only the D string, back to the E string. So then it's going to look a little something like this. And so I would do that, practicing right hand only until you feel like it's really comfortable for you and the string crossings are working and not kind of like crashing all around. And something that will help is when you're crossing the strings, you want to make sure that your bow is very close. You don't want to have like all these huge angles when you're crossing the strings. So when you're going to cross to the E string, you want to make sure that your bow is close to the E string before you do it. So that'll just help tighten it up. So that's the first thing I would do, isolate your right hand, practice that on its own, and then you can add the left hand. And then once everything feels comfortable, what you can also do, which I would recommend because playing this kind of spiccato-y stroke is a little bit different when you play mezzo forte versus piano. So a good mezzo forte versus piano. So that's something I would also isolate. You can do it on the A, on the D string here. You can just work on the stroke, like put your metronome on your goal tempo, 84, work on the stroke. At mezzo mezzo forte, and then also work on it at piano. And so those are all things that will be good to isolate. And so then in general, as you noticed, it's a more spiccato, bouncy stroke in the bow. So it's not anything like, you're not going to be playing like that. So the bow kind of bounces off the string, and you want to do that ideally around the balance point. Now, I have this whale sticker on my bow for fun. You can put a stick on your bow. It's not going to hurt it. But that will help you, know just visually, like, where that is. And so all in all, that's what I would do here. Let's just review. So we're working on string crossings and isolating the right hand, and then you add in the left hand, and then what you can also do is isolate the stroke in general, practice on one note at mezzo forte, and then at piano with your metronome going. And then at the end you can put it all together, and there you have it. For an excerpt like this, what we want to show is that we can coordinate our right hand and left hand together so that everything sounds very clear and clean. So if you can't play it at the tempo that you hear it in the recording, it doesn't matter. What we're looking for is that it's as clear and clean as possible. Okay, so what I would do is start at, maybe you could do half note equals 60, something really slow, and then just start from there and then slowly work up until you reach the threshold where you feel like it's maybe getting a little bit difficult to keep it under control. And so then you slowly work at pushing your threshold higher and higher every day. But I think to start, you want to build a good foundation. You don't want to start playing as fast as possible because you'll just learn bad habits, and then it will be very hard to unlearn them. So foundation for this one is definitely start slow. So we went over our recording and talking about tempo. So bowings and fingerings for this one. So what I would recommend is, so the very first measure 400 in the part, we're going to hook the C's. So that means a double up there. Dun, dun, dun. And then retake. So it looks like this: down, up, down, retake, down, up, like that. And so a similar thing happens in 409. I played it in the recording going down, up, down, and then. But if you want to do, keep it consistent, you can do up, down, up, and then go on from there. And then again, same thing happens in 415. So you end down, then up, down, retake, like that. So those are the basic bowings for this. And then for fingerings, what I would do is, so 403 to 404, I would do a finger replacement. So you do 4-1, and then see the G in measure 405, we want to close that because it just sounds kind of brash if you play it open. So I would do 4 and then 1 on the low F, 4, and then you do a finger replacement into the next measure. So, and then your 4 is right there, and then the G's are right under your fingers, and then again another finger replacement, as in, so you're doing 1 on the G, and then go back to 4 to get in the same hand position that you were in half position in bar 403. And then again, you do a finger replacement into 407, close the G in 408, and then you're done. And so another fingering that I want to recommend, this would be in measure, So going from 413 to 414. So, okay. Okay, you're with me? So this last E of the bar, we're going to shift to first finger and then close this G, 4, 2, 4, 2, and then do open. So, and then also I'm pretty sure this video will be on YouTube so you can slow motion to see it if that went by too fast. So there we want to close that G because creates a string crossing that is really hard to do at a very fast tempo. So we're closing this to get around that. And then lastly, another fingering thing to just point out, in 418 to 419, you want to bar with your fourth finger. You don't want to jump backward if you can help it. Try to keep it down like this. Okay, so that's bowings and fingerings. And again, like I was talking about before, the main point in here is to be as clear and clean as possible. So when you're practicing things that go by really fast, again, what I was talking about before with isolating the right and the left hand, I would definitely be isolating your left hand because that's kind of where the action is happening. So try pitzing it. And then doing that sort of stuff, so you're solidifying what the fingering is in your left hand, because if you don't have this internalized in your body, then you add the right hand and there's so much stuff going on and it gets really overwhelming. So I would definitely suggest practicing the left hand by itself, just pitzing. And if you're really, industrious, you can isolate all the string crossings with the bow and then maybe write that on another piece of paper and practice them. Not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to do that, but something that I think helps is you can do 4 notes per bow. So you're actually doing the tempo you'll eventually do in your right hand, and the left hand is going slower. So that can also help. And then lastly, I just want to touch on the style of this. So the stroke is not going to be super on the string, but the faster you go, the more on the string it will be. So if you're at a medium-ish tempo, it's going to be off the string a little bit more. So you can kind of play with that, what works best for you, but overall it's not going to be really chunky. It's going to have a lighter feel, because if we think about the kind of equipment that musicians were working on back in the day, they had much lighter bows. The bass itself wasn't even standardized at that time, so obviously the sounds that they were making were going to be lighter, bouncier sounds, and now we have to simulate that with our equipment that we have today, which is what makes this more difficult. So again, we were talking about a bouncing stroke in the first excerpt. You're going to want to play this around the balance point of the bow, and then for style in general, on these quarter notes, they're not on the string, they're off the string, and you want to be phrasing. So dun 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 dun, because then again, in Mozart's time, a lot of this phrasing was known implicitly, and so it's not in the part, but if you listen to a recording, people are doing the phrasing, even if those dynamics are not written in. So hopefully that's a little crash course on Mozart and this excerpt in general, so hopefully that will give you a good place to start from. This one is pretty straightforward. The only bowing that I would suggest is going from measure 69 into 70. I would do a retake. So you're here and then that's it. The rest is pretty straightforward. And so then of course fingerings, like I said, I prefer to do it all on the G string. So 4, 2, 2, 1, and then yeah, okay. And then for measure 74, that one, because now we're doing eighth notes and we're kind of blending in the texture there with everything that's going on, you can definitely play that B flat on the D string. So 4, 2, 1, 4. And then when you get here, I would play this B flat on the E string. Because this, that's a big shift. And I think, you know, as long as you get closer to the bridge, use more weight in your right hand and a little less speed in the bow, you can get a similar quality here as you would get there. Okay, and so then what I was going to talk about before, but I cut myself off, is the style of this, which is we're going to be into the string, very legato, which is not something we were doing before. So this is a complete stylistic shift. We're thinking like very romanticized Russian, heavy, deep sound. So like my bow is not leaving the string at all. And so only when you get here, I'm just releasing a little bit after each note to give it a more round 3D quality. Otherwise it would sound like... So again, if you are able to release in between each note, I would do that because that gives a more, you know, like sung quality. Otherwise, it's totally fine. You're playing into the string, that's the style. And so now the hardest thing about this is obviously the intonation. We are in B flat minor, which is not a key that we usually ever will play in, and don't worry, that's not something that's gonna come up often. And so something that I would recommend for sure is playing a B flat minor scale. And so I know you'll have to play a scale for your audition. And if you're gonna play this excerpt in the audition, if you play B flat minor, you're essentially warming yourself up to play this excerpt. This excerpt, now going on to the idea of tempo, what are we doing? Unfortunately, it's one of those excerpts that you just kind of have to bust through it. It's a very difficult excerpt. There's a lot of technical concepts that you're going to be showcasing in this one. And so tempo, definitely you just want to do what you can do comfortably. You don't want to go into the audition and play it really fast, but have a lack of clarity and, you know, have the panel guessing where the beat is. You want to go in there with a very, very solid idea of where the beat is and what you're doing. And in my opinion, and I think the panel would probably think this too, if you go in there and play it slowly but really well, they'll be way more impressed than if you go in there and like haphazardly try to play it as fast as possible. And you'll probably notice when you listen to recordings, goes very quickly. So again, I really, really want to emphasize quality over quantity or speed here. So coming up with bowings and fingerings are our third most important thing. So the stroke on this one is down, down, up, down, up. So the way this works is, again, I would play maybe a little in from the balance point. That's what I've been doing. Again, my wail really helps. So you play the first note and then you release it and retake to the same place in the bow that you just were. So down, retake, down, like that. And so the idea also is when you're playing this that it goes dun da 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 dun da 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 dun. So you're going forward instead of dun da 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 da. So there's a difference in the sound there. And so this one, definitely you want to isolate this stroke. Play it on an A minor scale. Again, that is something that you could do for your audition. I mean, you won't be playing the stroke on the scale when you play the scale in your audition, but you could warm yourself up by playing A minor in the audition before you play this excerpt. And so, again, to kind of get your ear where it needs to be and then also be thinking about the stroke, I would practice this stroke on an A minor scale. So like, and so on, and definitely do that with a metronome as well. And that's the basic one. And then for the bowings later, we have, so that is slurred, and then up, 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 up. So you do a turnaround there. So slurred, up, slurred, up. Every time that happens. Definitely want to eliminate big shifts because of how fast it is. So for here, I would play it on the D string. So 4, 2, and then 4, 2, 4, 1. Shift here to the A string instead of going back here because that's a big shift. 2, 1, and then here 4, 2, 1, 4. And you can bar this. I do 2, 4. That's just easier for me to get quality of sound. 2, 4, 1, 4, and then here, instead of shifting around, do it all in this block position. So you're doing that by pivoting around. Your thumb stays in the same location, but you're pivoting around it instead of doing all these shifts. And then here, you can do this down the G string. And then I would, instead of going all the way to the G string, and then you're gonna, close this D, and then I would go here, kind of went through that quickly, but from measure 11, there, to close here, and then here, and then as you're going here, I would shift here into thumb position. This may be the hardest part, but at faster tempos, it's impossible to do that, all those shifts there. So here, you're not shifting at all. Your thumb just locks down on the A, and you keep your fingers as close to the string as possible, so you're eliminating excess movement. And then like that, and then shifting out of thumb position, 1, 2, and then you can shift back 1, 4. So that's basically the meat and potatoes of how this goes. The main things that we want to work on here is we have our theme. That's, one in no particular order, but theme. Then we have measure 6 is a difficult thing, and then measure 14 is another difficult measure. And then at the end, that scale going up, you have to think about what your bow is doing. So those are 4 things to focus on in this excerpt. So first of all, our theme. So we're kind of releasing a little bit in the first eighth notes. So it's not on this, it doesn't sound like that. And then phrasing it, da-da-dun, da-da-dun, da-da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, 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 something like that, and you can practice singing it. You'll hear how they do it in the recording. It's similar to that. And then you also want to be phrasing when you're doing the eighth notes, like da 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 da, something like that. And so at the end, you're also phrasing up to the top. So that's kind of how the theme and the phrasing goes. And then just to cover how to practice hard measures like 6 and 14. So you want to isolate the shifts first. So, okay, my shift here, 2 to 4 here. So, and then open. So we're gonna work on that with the left hand first, and then add back the bow. And that I would definitely isolate the string crossing. So the string crossing looks something like that's the string crossings without any notes. And so I would definitely isolate that and practice that with your bow. Same thing here on this one. So practice those string crossings alone. And so again, that's how to practice those. And the fingering for that, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, and then here. And then just a couple more fingering things. In measure 8, I would definitely close that G. And then again, we're going to close the G there. And then close it in measure 13 here. And then coming up into measure 20, close it like that. Okay, last thing I want to talk about really quickly is in the last scale up to the top. So you'll notice that if you do the same stroke here, it sounds choked. So what you'll have to practice is here, you need more weight in the stroke, a little less speed. Here, you'll be closer to the bridge, less weight, more speed. So you're getting the same quality of stroke, but you have to adjust the variables so that the quality stays the same throughout the scale instead of getting choked up here, which I'm not sure if I demonstrated a great example of that, but that's something that you need to definitely be thinking about when you're working on this. And then the stroke we covered in the other excerpt, so you know kind of where that's at. This is a middle tempo, so I would be more off the string, not on at all. And so that should cover it. And I wish you all the best of luck in your practice. And again, a lot of these concepts of organizing your time and figuring out like concrete steps that you can do to bite off little chunks at a time and go slow are all applicable to other aspects of your life. You know, when you're applying to college, or you know, when you're I don't know, even like doing your homework or organizing essays that you have to write. It's all applicable. Or again, when you apply to jobs. So these are really great skills to hone in on, and you would be surprised at how far it will take you just to be working on these excerpts. So again, wishing you all the best of luck and have fun.